Hello, everyone. Hello. It's wonderful to be back with DVF for another International Women's Day. I remember when she first started hosting these with us, all of us at Vital Voices. And honestly, it was long before these issues were popular and before they were illegal. And she really wanted to figure out, how do I use my power, my voice, my platform to give voice? And when I think about every single woman who's spoken up on this stage, that's exactly what she's done. And I hope that all of you are inspired to do the same. Our program is now going to take a bit of a global pivot. So we're going to be welcoming women leaders from around the globe, women leaders that we work with at Vital Voices. And I know that when we look around the world today, it's easy to feel disheartened. We see conflict and crisis, disinformation and division. I mean, it feels like a runaway train. But you know what? There have always been those voices that wanted to divide us, to let us believe that there wasn't enough time, enough energy, enough opportunity or resources to turn things around. But there are always other voices. And what we do at Vital Voices is we search the world for them. Those leaders who are on the front lines, chipping away and taking on some of the world's greatest challenges, from peace building to climate to disinformation. Women who are truly refining and defining what power means and a new reality for all of us. I'm thrilled to be joined in discussion today by 4 such women we've worked with over the years. Let me introduce them and bring them onto the stage. First, we have Chebbi. Chebbi is joining us from Tunisia. Is the founder of Nala Feminist Collective. Next, we have Mariam Jalabi. She's co-founder of the Syrian Women's Political Movement. Next, Nika Kovač. Nika has joined us from Slovenia. Nika leads and is the founding director of the 8th of March Research Institute. And finally, let's give it up for Nobel Peace Laureate, Leymah Gbowee. So, Leymah, I want to start with you. Of course, you just got seated. You led one of the most extraordinary efforts for peace and revolution in Liberia. And you did it by bringing women leaders together and crossing lines that typically divide. Mm-hmm. Muslim and Christian women coming together. How did you build that movement? And for those in the audience who are feeling like, here in the United States, where do we go? What do we do? How do we build a movement? How do we speak out? What advice do you have for us?
Thank you, Alyse. Thank you all for having me. They actually moved the bars too because of me. I do activism. I don't spend a lot of time at the bar, so I don't know how to climb. I was worried I was going to fall. In Liberia, I was 17 when the war started, fresh out of high school. We went in the circle of that war for 14 years. We successfully killed 10% of our population. I tell people when the war started, even though I was 17, I had never seen a dead person. So the first time I saw a dead person on the street, the dogs were eating the corpse. I froze. And as the war progressed, I could walk past a dead person. So it becomes normalized. By 2003, it was really bad. And the way we describe our lives is that we went from bad to worse to ridiculous. Women, about 65% were allegedly raped or sexually assaulted. At that moment, a child would be walking to the market and someone would pick him up, throw him in a pickup truck, and take him to the war front. So people were losing their children left, right, and center. And I was really angry You know, people say, oh, don't be angry. I'll come back to that anger part. But I was really angry and looking for a way. And I met some women who were also looking for a way. And we decided, let's come together. And how did we come together, Alyse? We came together with $10 US. The meeting we had, our first meeting, we sat at a desk that had bullet hole in it. And it was strapped on a brick. All of the chairs were broken. We sat there. We were 7 and said we needed to do something. So we wrote a statement. But the statement we wrote, someone said, let's say the women of Liberia. And I said to them, it's going to be disingenuous. We're 7 people. How do we claim to be the women of Liberia, 7 of us? So we wrote the statement and named ourselves. By naming ourselves, we gained traction. The next day, all of those in media wanted to know who were the 7 fools that wrote their names because they were about to be killed. Because we live in dictatorship, the war. So once people came and started asking us, we had a friend who was in media. We gave her that $10 and said, put it in the news. That's how it went in the news. Then we decided, let's bring the Muslim women, because we had worked with the Muslim women. We had worked with the Christian women, and they had formed themselves into peace groups. We brought them together and said, when your child is killed, when you cry, is the tears of the Christian woman different from that of the Muslim woman? The answer was no. And the question was, as we sit in this room, if someone came and opened fire, can the bullet choose a Christian woman or Christian woman from a Muslim woman? The answer was no. Women were sold. We put that movement together. We had no clue what we were doing, but the one thing we knew was that we wanted to bring our country back to peace. So our slogan was peace first, peace last, peace today, peace forever. First day we came out and we were about 65 women. We did a silent march. Next time we were about 250. When we unveiled our movement, we were about 2,500 women. Wow. Charles Taylor, who was the president then, came and passed by us. He didn't stop. Next day he passed, he didn't stop, and then he didn't come to see us again. A turning point in our movement was when we were insistent that the government went to the peace table. And most times people would say, what was peculiar first for Liberia was that we gained independence in 1847. Women were not allowed to vote in 1957, 100 plus years later. So we had a history of women not being in public, women not being involved. And so even the Christian and Muslim women doing this was unheard of. One of the reasons why it was important for us to be outside, if you go back to all of the footages from the war in Liberia, you would think that there were no women, because all of the media were only showing boys with guns, men with guns, and the women were absent. So when we stepped out with our movement, we invaded a space that had been taken for men only. And so if I may answer your question about today US, because our story is in a documentary called Pray the Devil Back to Hell. You can watch it. But today world that we live in, I think the silence is deafening.
Yeah.
People are complaining in front of their TVs and in front of their computers. No action is crazy. No action is nonsensical. No action is irrelevant, especially when you find yourself in a time where tyranny is about to choke the life out of you. Today, the silence is deafening because a lot of people are still comfortable. We can still sit in YouTube office and talk. We can still travel and do different things. In Liberia, we got our wake-up call when the war came and choked us. And I think the world that we live in today, whether it's the US, whether it's Europe, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Israel, Palestine, wherever you find yourself as a woman, this is not the moment for your silence to be deafening.
Yes.
This is the moment for you to write if you can write, for you to smile if you can smile, and if that smile is going to bring a change somewhere, you can do it. For you to cry if you can cry. But what the movement is calling all of us for in this world is to take action. This is a moment for action, people. Bring children, girls and boys from your community into your living room. Start talking to them about what peace is. And for me, I have come to a place where I understand that peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is the presence of conditions that give dignity to all. So step out of this room and ask yourself, how many people are living in dignity? And what are the times calling me to do? I'll park it there.
Yeah, thank you. Nika, I want to come to you next. You have led some of the most progressive movements for democracy. She seems all sweet and nice, but this woman, she is such a badass. I want you to talk about what made your movement, particularly your most recent endeavors, just unstoppable.
Yeah, so firstly, I think that the condition of every single movement is that it begins with a moment of darkness, a moment of fear when you decide that you will open this window of opportunity and push for a change. And my window of change happened when I was living in the US for 1 year, and your constitutional court just took away reproductive rights from you. And I was shocked by hopelessness and how scary it was, and I became obsessed with this idea to protect reproductive rights in Europe. And I found a way. So basically the way is that you write a legal proposal, and then you ask European Commission to change European law. And for doing this, you need to collect 1 million signatures of citizens. Only 10 initiatives did this, and every single person said to me, this is impossible. All the men were saying, no, don't do this, it's legally not possible, but I found a group of lawyers in their 20s, girls, who wrote a proposal, and it was accepted, and they said, now you can collect 1 million signatures. And they thought you won't make it. But what we did is that with joy, with smile, I always say laughter and smile puts the enemies away, and all those men who are violent become so afraid of you. So we did this huge campaign, which was filled with pink color, with glitters, with stories about solidarity, about protection of reproductive rights. We built a movement in every single country in the European Union, made out of young people and retired women who have a lot of time. They were working as a community, and we didn't collect just 1 million signatures, but 1,150,000 of them. And we became the biggest movement, feminist movement in Europe. We will now go to the institutions. But if I give you 3 advices how to build unstoppable movement, is firstly be stubborn. Work all the time, don't stop, and every single man who says to you, don't do it, do it even more. And second thing is, you cannot do it alone. We women are super badass and we can do a lot, but also we need men allies. I was lucky enough that President Obama asked me to do a takeover of his Instagram and show the campaign, that Mark Ruffalo supported us on Oscars, that so many men were on the streets collecting signatures for their granddaughters. And the third thing is, have a lot of fun. Because we do this in our free time. This is something that it is super hard, and if you don't have fun, and if you don't dance, and if you don't find joy in it, you will stop fighting, and we need to fight more than ever.
You all always remind me that the impossible is just a word, and we've got to make it possible. And speaking of that, Mariam, you have been and leading as co-founder the Syrian women's political movement. You've just returned from Syria. Talk about what people, I'm sure, told you was impossible, but you never gave up hope. The falling of that regime, 14 years, and you just returned.
Yes. I opened my eyes. I remember the first stories that I remember is my mom looking for my dad in detention centers, in prisons. And then my family fled. We all fled. That's how I ended up being in the US eventually, from passing through different countries. And when the regime of 54 years fell at a time when I'm looking, oh, what's happening in America? And it was quite of a sudden, on December 8th when this regime fell, it was like, now we're entering the future. And it come to us so fast. Because in 2017, after struggling to pull down the regime, as you know, a lot of the Middle Eastern countries have come out against, the dictatorships, and we tried to do something that was different. Is that how can we come together, like Nika was saying now, how can we come together and create something different? And I want to reiterate some of the stuff that has been said also, that our power, we've realized, cannot be done with one by one, because the whole of us would be so much stronger than the sum of our parts. And we realized this very fast, and we Syrian women came together and established the Syrian Women's Political Movement in 2017. At a time, there was no hope. We're looking at a very dark tunnel when the international community started normalizing with this dictator, with the Assad dictatorship. And we kept on going because we had hope. So imagine on December 8th when this regime fell, literally crumbled down, like in movies, and he took off in a plane, he and his family, and flew over to Moscow, to Russia. So what happened to us is that, what do we do now? All of our songs are about resistance, all of our dances are about resistance. What do we do now to actually look into the future and do something that's more hopeful, that gives women and men and everybody in Syria some kind of a vision of what might be better for us in the future? So having worked for over 8 years together as the Syrian Women Political Movement, we started with 2 people, became 7, 8, became 28. We were over 200. It's like we all got together very fast meetings over Zoom, and Zoom after COVID, thankfully, has become kind of cut down the distances, because we were talking to our members, 40% of our members who were inside Syria, who we never met actually, because we're in the diaspora. There are people who are refugees, all over the region. We all come together, we decide this is the moment for us to go to Damascus. I hadn't been for 14 years back in Damascus, and we decide to go. When I arrived to the border, I ask about my status. I'm entering, and they say, you're wanted by 3 branches of the government. I'm like, yeah, a badge of honor. My friend had 4 arrest warrants. I'm like, she wins, over me. So this is the kind of mentality we went in. And on January 8th, the Syrian Women Political Movement members and people came together to create this conference that invited 350 people. And one of the press and members and everybody in the middle of Damascus, in one of the older, Sham hotel. Sham is Damascus in Arabic, that was revered and, considered, a center for opposition meetings and people coming together. And one of the people who came to this conference was Thuraya al-Hadi. Thuraya al-Hadi had given birth 2 weeks earlier, prior to this, in Raqqa. Raqqa is 2 days distance from Damascus to come by bus. She decides, she's a member of the movement, she's like, I am not going to miss this moment. And she brings her daughter, Salam, of 2 weeks. She comes on a bus, she stops on the way because she couldn't continue, it's too long of a journey. She comes and attends the conference. Shams Antar comes from also Qamishli, which is also the other end of Syria from Damascus. She's from Kurdish background. She was not allowed to speak her language. She was not allowed to wear her clothes. She comes to the conference with her traditional clothes and speaking her language. And we had this amazing energy, this amazing meeting that made sure that we gave hope to everybody who's there. We don't know what's going to happen in Syria. We're very hopeful, we're cautiously optimistic, but it was very important that we come together. I want to add one more point. This was made possible by my friends, my feminist, liberal, white friends who are in the US. I called around and I said, we don't have money to go into Syria to do this conference because there's sanctions on Syria. We can't get money inside. So I actually had to take cash. So I had to get cash. My friend Carol, an American, who actually ran around trying to get me the funding, and we got the funding, and I took cash with me to go inside Syria. And our team was working 24/7 together in order to put this conference together. A lot of people who did this on volunteer basis coming together. So I'm using that story because it's very important to remember that we need to always support each other wherever we are in the world. With the dire situation that's happening now for us as women in North America, in America, in the US, women came together and did this. And also, I want to mention, it's very important that this keeps on happening and going. Only yesterday, I was just telling Alyse, she didn't know this, there was funding with all of the dire situation in the US that went to women who are working on the ground in Syria. So look at this connection between what's happening in New York, what's happening in DC, and taking all of that energy, amazing energy, down to Syria for women to continue doing their work. I think that's where hope comes from, and I see a much brighter future for us, maybe I don't know, in 20, 30, 40 years from now, but we're getting there with all of the work for us working together.
So important. And I think I can imagine it's not just the money, it's the symbolisms of solidarity.
Yes.
I want to come to you now. So you were the first youth envoy to the African Union. You have always been in rooms where maybe you're not welcome, raising your voice. I mean, all of these women are badasses. But you have really pioneered incredible change by bringing the power of young women from across all of Africa together through Nala Feminists. So talk a little bit about that and some of the greatest successes you've had.
Thank you, Alyse. I can't get enough of hearing Nika and Mama Lima's stories, and now I have a new sister, Mariam, and it seems like a panel of troublemakers because you were talking about warrant arrest. I got jailed a couple times, and just to reflect that I've been hearing a lot of people today talking about when they felt in charge, and I love you, Diane. And I remember that, when I actually really felt in charge, and I think it's the moment I believed that change is possible. I lived under dictatorship for 23 years, and I was part of change. I was part of a youth movement that toppled the dictatorship, that ended the regime and started the Second Republic. And I think when you feel in charge of being a political being, when you feel you have power in your voice, when you feel that you're not here to blame or watch the system, you're here to change it, it empowers you to keep the hope. It empowers you to keep moving forward. So on intergenerational co-leadership, I was appointed the youth envoy. In every room, the next person sitting next to me would be 40, 50 years older. The youngest, the only female, and I wanted to find a strategy to navigate the system. It actually started as a personal strategy. So first of all, I am in that position because of the many African women who made that possible, who paved the way for it. Because we're talking about the belly of the beast, an institution that is male-dominated. But then also I became friends with the senior women. And these are women like UNDSG, Amina Mohammed, who would step out of a panel and give me her seat. These are women like Dr. Vera Songwe, the former boss of Economic Commission on Africa, who would take my hand into a bilateral meeting because the protocol outside decided you're a kiddo and you can't meet the president, right? So being young and female on the continent is a dangerous place. You face ageism and misogyny at the same time. And I'm talking about a continent that has the average age of African leaders at 64 and the average age of the population at 20. So it's definitely not representative of the population. And so it worked. I was friends with the senior leaders who opened the door and who supported me and actually to succeed in the mandate. So I took that to become the mainstream. And I started to talk to 55 egos of 55 African countries to convince them that if you don't want to be the next ousted dictator, we got to co-lead this together. Right? So I started to convince them of an approach of intergenerational co-leadership. And what that means in their countries is lowering the age of entry into government, waiving the money for electoral candidate for young people, appointing massively affirmative action for youth in ministerial and parliamentary seats. And in 2 years, we increased youth leadership, actually the highest rate since the 80s. And I say the 80s because these same leaders right now were in their 20s and 30s in the 80s. right? So it works. And we even passed a resolution in the AU Peace and Security Council on Youth Peace and Security, the first and the only continent to do so. But then, leading a youth movement and being, I don't know how to say it, but really subjected to, we can be led by a young woman, I decided, you know what? I'm going to put all my effort on women, right? Because at any point, yes, we need male allies, but they can just leave you behind. When a revolution happened in Tunisia and the transition, good job. Women were on the front line. Now we cut the cake as men. So I'm building an army of women to take charge of the continent, and our... And, my mission really is for every young woman to be in her political power. Last year, we hosted a Nala Femme Summit in Namibia to rally behind the first female presidential candidates in July. And we wanted to rally the youth vote 3 months after she was elected president. We're doing it in Tanzania this year. We're going to do a 2027 election in Kenya. And we're going to massively take charge of our continent, because we're not just about women being in leadership, we're training women on African feminist principles. We want them to lead differently. We want them to be emotionally intelligent, to be collaborative. We want them to really give hope to this word that is very fucked up, but we would have to make it, it's not a choice anymore. We would have to make it. Something else I want to say on peace and security, I think we need to stop the weaponization of the words. The word we want to live in is violence-free, is stigma-free, is financially free for women, but it's also bullshit-free, because we're sick and tired of countries claiming to protect women's rights in other countries and then go and export arms to bomb the same women and girls they claim to protect. And we hold the United States accountable for $80 billion arms exports. That's 41% of the world's arms export. That has to stop. And even when the US puts an embargo on countries like Sudan, that, no, we're not going to send arms there, they go around, on paper, but they go around and give money to, their allies to do the dirty work, right? So for me, right now, in this moment, there's so many countries we have to be in solidarity with. There's so many struggles we have to be in solidarity with, because we never know when that will hit us. So we have to be together, and we have to understand each other's struggle. And at this moment, Sudan really needs that kind of support. 11 million people displaced, girls as young as 12 years old being subjected to sexual slavery. The war has to stop. And if one thing I would ask you to do is go on change.org, sign a petition called Ceasefire in Sudan. That's, one click of a petition, that's an act of solidarity.
Thank you. Wow, listening to all of you, it's incredibly powerful. Gallup recently released a survey which asked people, what is the one thing you want from your leader? And far and away, what people said was hope. And I think about each of you, you bring hope. And that is what we need. We need leaders who refuse to spread fear and instead spread hope. So very lightning round, because we've been told we have to wrap up, but I want to come back to each of you to say, give this audience hope. How do we find hope? How do we spread hope? What gives you hope? Leymah?
One thing I say to people living in a world and being in a space where I see conflict, I see death, I see destruction, I see oppression and suppression every day. There's no way I will continue to do this work if I'm pessimistic about a future of good. But quickly, I would say a few years ago, I met an imam who brought 4 girls to me because they were at risk of being married off. I took them and sent them to school. Today, one is a doctor, one is an engineer, and 2 are accountants. This year, Imam brought 27 girls. And I have taken those 27 and we started sending them to school. That's hope. not giving up when you don't even know where your journey will end.
Thank you. Nika.
Yeah, for me, hope is in the moments when you build a community with unlikely allies. In my home country, I get a lot of death threats. I was physically attacked, and a couple of months ago, I was really, really badly attacked, and they said that they will do something on one event to me. And a group of super conservative old men came, and they said, you helped us when we needed help with our village, and you showed up, and now we are here. Even though we don't believe in abortion rights, we will stand next to you and protect you if anyone will want to do something to you. And this gives me hope that we see human in each other and support each other.
Mariam.
I feel that we coming together and working together, no matter how hard it seems and how difficult it is, there's always a tipping point. There's always a point when things will change and things will topple and we will change this patriarchy. I think that it is very important also, like Aya said here, is that it's very important for us to continue working in spite of all of that's happening in the systems of the world, like where we talk and not, not act according as we talk. And women having been truthful and transparent and working this hard, I always believe that energy, good energy, karma will create that change. And it happened for us in Syria. We're still hoping that it's going to keep on going. But when the regime in Syria toppled, it was like, yes, our work didn't go to waste. We have been preparing for that moment for a long time. And I believe it will happen. Those tipping points always happen. So let's wait for that tipping, be ready for it so that we can take action when that happens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I wake up in the morning. Activists, we get burned out, we get depressed, we reach an edge of like giving up. But I tell myself, do something about it. That frustrates you. I don't think you should be a civil society leader or a political leader to, be an activist. You can be an engineer, a model, athlete. We saw amazing, incredible people, a YouTuber, a content creator. But if you do something about it, then you're an activist. And don't shy away from supporting young women leaders. It's not being partisan if you are political. Institutions are run by individuals. We have to support and identify and invest and rally behind these young, progressive women leaders. If I would choose, it'd be young, African, and female. And smash the patriarchy every day.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, just one last word from me. If I've learned anything working nearly 30 years with, I think, 47,000 women leaders across 188 countries through Vital Voices, I've learned that women lead differently, and that difference is desperately needed in our world today. So thank you all so much for being here and for your leadership.